Hello, and welcome back to the A.M.I.R YouTube channel. Today's question: what is the government agency known as ICE? ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It's a department of America's Homeland Security that enforces federal laws related to immigration, customs, trade, and border control. So you might be thinking, what are ICE's duties? On their website, their duties have been listed as preventing terrorism, protecting the U.S. from cross-border crime, enforcing immigration laws within the U.S., and preventing the illegal movement of goods and people. Here's an explanation of ICE by the Arizona Republic News Channel.
U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. Following the attacks on 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security was born, and with it came ICE. The mission? Interior Immigration Enforcement, meaning the identification, arrest, and deportation of undocumented immigrants throughout the interior of the U.S. That's right, ICE is not the same as Border Patrol. Border Patrol agents arrest immigrants at the border, while ICE arrests undocumented immigrants already living within the U.S. Under President Obama, ICE prioritized removing undocumented immigrants who had committed serious crimes in America. President Trump campaigned on a promise to target bad hombres, a phrase he frequently used in conjunction with murderers, violent criminals, and gang members. But after assuming office, he ordered ICE to arrest all undocumented immigrants, no matter their criminal background. More recently, Congress passed an emergency funding bill to help alleviate the worsening situation at the southern border. ICE now has an annual budget of $6 billion and more than 20,000 law enforcement and support personnel in more than 400 offices in the United States and around the world.
ICE investigators are to gather information about those who are committing crimes or planning to attack the U.S. They also investigate international criminals who smuggle weapons, drugs, humans, or other goods into the U.S. One question is, how much has ICE ramped up its activity in the recent years? KPBS YouTube channel breaks down statistics from ICE's own website and its data.
What if I told you that the federal government has a database and it shows you exactly who is being held in immigration detention, and you can look it up? My name is Gustavo Solis, and today we're giving you a special version of the Border Brief. I'm going to show you how to look into this data, which comes directly from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is published every 2 weeks, so it gives us an up-to-date look into who is being detained and where. The first thing you're going to do is go to this website, scroll all the way to the bottom, and download this data set. That will take you to this spreadsheet, which looks a bit overwhelming, but don't worry, I'm here to walk you through it. The first place you want to start is this Detention FY25 tab. It shows you exactly how many people are being detained and by which government agency they were arrested, either Customs and Border Protection or Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This table helps us get beyond the rhetoric and take a look at a historic transition in immigration enforcement under the Trump administration. It shows a massive shift from people being arrested along the border by Customs and Border Protection to people being arrested in the interior of the country by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Compare the last few months of the Biden presidency to the first few months of the Trump administration. You'll notice that under Biden, most of the arrests came from CBP, almost twice as many as ICE. But it's the exact opposite under Trump. You can see that starting in January, ICE began arresting more people than CBP. And that trend has grown each month since then. This data shows us the trend of less people at the border and a lot more enforcement inside the US. Now, we know ICE is arresting a lot more people, but who are they? To find that out, we can look at this table here. This table from January shows 62% of people arrested by ICE were convicted criminals. Just 6%, or less than 1,000 people, had no criminal record. Compare that to the latest table from June. Now, just 36% were convicted criminals, and ICE is arresting more than 11,000 people with no criminal records. That's almost 1/3 of all ICE arrests. Now, we're seeing a sharp decline in the number of convicted criminals and a massive increase in the number of people without criminal records. This shows us what happens when the Trump administration puts a lot more pressure on ICE to increase the number of arrests. There are only so many murderers and rapists out there, which is why ICE has gone from arresting less than 1,000 people without criminal records to more than 11,000 in a short amount of time. Let's dig a little deeper. Convicted criminal can mean a lot of things: petty theft, drug possession, assault, murder, driving without a license, Fortunately, the data gives us a breakdown by what they call ICE threat level. You can find it down here on the Facilities tab. This shows us the population breakdown of every immigration detention center in the country. According to their footnotes, ICE threat level is graded on a scale of 1 to 3, with 1 being the most severe. People without criminal records are simply classified as no ICE threat level. If you add up all the numbers of detainees classified as ICE threat level 1, you will see they total 3,207. In other words, just 7% of everyone detained by ICE is considered the worst of the worst. On the other hand, 83% of people detained by ICE are classified as no ICE threat level. These numbers, which come directly from ICE, tell us a very different story than what Trump administration officials tell us on national TV.
We've been doing this correctly. We've been building cases. We've been going after the worst of the worst and doing it the right way.
That's why President Trump from day one said, we're going to concentrate on national security threats and public safety threats, and that's what we're doing.
And we can't take the risk of letting these Biden illegals roam around freely so that the next American daughter can get raped, the next American kid can get murdered, the next American family can get splintered and torn apart.
I want to leave you with a little homework assignment. Find out what is going on in your community. For example, here's data from the Otay Mesa Detention Center right here in San Diego. I can see exactly how many men and women classified as criminal and non-criminal are being detained here. As you can see, it's people who are classified as non-criminals. You can use this data to find out what's going on in your community. Thanks for watching. I'm Gustavo Solis, and this is the Border Brief.
Another question many have is what happens after someone is detained by ICE? Here's a video clip from CBS Morning News.
What might these raids look like, especially given the non-compliance on the local level? Joining us now is John Sandwig. He's a former acting ICE director. He served in the Obama administration. John, thank you very much for joining us. Just before the election, Tom Homans, the current ICE director, told 60 Minutes that there are not going to be mass roundups. There's not going to be concentration camps. He's heard all the scary language. It's ridiculous. So what is the reality as someone who's been in the job that he's currently in? When you go out and you make raids and you find somebody, what happens? What's it like, the raid itself and then the aftermath?
Yeah, Tony, I think it's important to kind of break this down to the traditional way that ICE does business, where all the resources, that are applied to immigration enforcement come from the Department of Homeland Security. And what it looks like the administration is planning, because I think those are two dramatically different things. Traditionally, what ICE does is ICE starts looking at the criminal justice system. We look for targets, individuals who have been convicted of a serious crime, who for some reason or another escaped ICE's grasp as they went through jails or prisons. What then ICE does is kind of build a target list. We go out and knock on doors and try to find those individuals. When they're apprehended, they're put in detention, and then they go through the immigration court. But we've never seen anything like what's going on here, Tony, where the administration is going to kind of use all the resources of the entire federal government, including the military, to supplement DHS resources and do things kind of like what we've heard about, enlisting border alcohol and tobacco firearms, ATF agents, DEA agents, kind of signing up sheriff's offices across the country, and then building mass detention centers on military bases. This is going to be a completely different type of immigration enforcement.
So, John, advocates locally are handing out Know Your Rights flyers. They're trying to arm undocumented immigrants with some kind of defense. But are there any rights that they can use if they are arrested?
Well, traditionally, migrants in this country, I think this is something that a lot of people didn't understand. The biggest challenge ICE has always had to, ICE's capacity to deport is traditionally 250,000, you could argue up to 400,000. But the biggest challenge they face were these backlogs in the immigration courts. And I don't think most people understood that the majority of migrants in this country cannot be deported until they have an opportunity to present their defenses or their claims or, their right to stay in the United States to an immigration judge. Traditionally, that gives them a lot of rights, but it's very clear where the administration is going here. They're looking to strip the migrants of that due process. They know that mass deportation is impossible if you have to go through these backlogged immigration courts where there's 3 million pending cases and only 900 judges. On average, it's taking, in many cases, rather, 3 to 4 years for someone to be deported. So what they've done is they've characterized this as a foreign invasion. And you see that in all these executive orders. It treats this not as a domestic law enforcement problem, but an actual foreign policy policy, national security problem. And what he's doing is he's laying the groundwork to invoke the Alien Enemies Act, which he said in his inaugural speech he would do. And what that ostensibly would do, if it's not stopped by a court, would allow them to strip migrants of those due process. So a lot of those Know Your Rights bills and pamphlets that were given, some of them still apply, but the majority of them, and the opportunity to present legal defenses to an immigration judge, it's very clear that the administration is planning on stripping those by calling this, by invoking these military-esque authorities and invoking the Alien Enemies Act.
And John, a lot of sanctuary cities, places that have said that they are not going to fully comply with the federal government effort to deport people, they are not going to, aid federal agents necessarily fully. How much does that impede ICE?
It's been an irritant for ICE. Traditionally, it has not impeded ICE too dramatically. Look, the main way that has historically hurt ICE is ICE has visibility into every single person booked into all the jails and prisons in the United States. And so what ICE wants to do, and what we want to do for officer safety reasons, is take custody of criminals when they're booked in a jail because they're in a secure environment. And frankly, it's also more efficient to take custody of people there rather than going out in the streets. But so the sanctuary policy, but even if we're sanctuary policies where you have some cities, let's say you say we're not, typically they would only say we're not going to share with you people we deem not to be public safety threats. But there were some jurisdictions that probably, in my opinion, went too far and would say individuals convicted of violent crimes, we will not let ICE officers take them into custody. But in those cases, ICE would then just have to go onto the streets and find those individuals. But again, we're going well beyond all of that now. We've never seen, the reaction to sanctuary policies traditionally has been political. We complain about it publicly, highlight how dangerous people are being released on the streets. But as you noted earlier in your reporting, this administration has now told the Department of Justice that could be considered violations of federal law, harboring migrants, and that is going to be a top priority for the Department of Justice to potentially pursue criminal investigations of state officials who do not cooperate with this mass deportation effort.
Now, the final question is, what are our rights in terms of ICE? Here's a clip from Democracy Now!
I coordinate our LA Raids Rapid Response Network with CHIRLA, which is the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights. And what we've been doing ever since June, when we first expected these operations to begin, is making sure that our community is prepared. And that means doing the Know Your Rights workshops, telling our community members through these workshops not to open the door if ICE comes to their house, to remain silent if ICE stops them on the street, and to make sure they don't sign anything and that they ask to speak to an immigration attorney before they offer any information. So we've been doing these Know Your Rights workshops with our different partners in Los Angeles ever since June, because that's when we first thought that these operations would begin. So honestly, every single week since then, we've been in preparation mode. We've been strategizing with different volunteer attorneys that are part of our LA Raids Rapid Response Network to make sure that we have a strategy if people start being arrested, and then there needs to be intakes at the local ICE processing center. And so regardless of what happens, whether the operations start tomorrow or whether they start on Sunday, we have been prepared.
Explain what you mean when you say don't open the door. Would then ICE knock the door down?
Right. So here's the thing. ICE only has permission to enter an individual's home if they have a judicial warrant that is signed by a judge. And not only that, but that judicial warrant has to have all of the information, including the person's name, the person's address, the time of the incident. All of that has to be accurate. So I can say, and our attorneys know this very well, that it is very rare that ICE is actually able to obtain a judicial arrest warrant. Most of the time, they do not have that, meaning they do not have permission to enter people's homes. So given that, we tell our community members that if ICE knocks on the door, no matter how aggressively, no matter what they say to people, and we do know that this is a very deceptive agency that pretends to be police, that doesn't answer questions, we tell our community members that no matter what ICE does, don't open the door, because the only way that they could get in is with that judicial arrest warrant. And if they give you any sort of administrative warrant or any other kind of document, you have to review it to make sure that it's a judicial warrant signed by a judge. So that's what we tell our community members here in Los Angeles.
And what if they don't speak English? How do they read this warrant? And how do they know what to look for, what is legitimate and what isn't?
Exactly. That is a very good point. It is a very complicated process, which only makes it more important that we have these Know Your Rights workshops. So our Know Your Rights workshops, they're in Spanish. They're for our community members here in Los Angeles, our immigrant and undocumented members. And what we do is we have copies of a judicial arrest warrants and use that next to an administrative warrant that ICE usually uses when they goes to people's houses, and we compare the two. We pass those out to people so that they familiarize themselves with those documents, so that in the case that ICE does slip it under the door, they're able to recognize it. But I think that that's a very good point, that this is an agency that is trying to deceive people, and these people may not know what is going on. For the people that don't attend Know Your Rights workshops, they may not know what a judicial warrant is and whether ICE has permission to enter their home. And so that only makes it more important that we do the outreach to make sure as many people are aware of their rights as possible.
We added in the description the website link to the American Civil Liberties Union, known as ACLU, so that you can know your rights in terms of ICE. I have added all the links from this video in the description below, so that you may go to these YouTube channels and watch their original content. Thank you for taking time to watch, and please subscribe to this channel and share it with others in order to get the latest uploads on the geopolitical landscape that our mainstream media chooses not to cover. See you next time. Thank you for watching, and have a blessed day.